Deku? I think he's some pro. My clouds. My head on the clouds not coming down. Chapter 31. Therapy. So, are you just gonna sit here in surly silence for the whole session, or are we actually gonna talk about what's bothering you?
Nothing's bothering me, mutt.
Katsuki snapped.
Maybe I just don't want to talk to an idiot like you. Ever thought about that?
Hound Dog chuckled.
Yeah, I thought about it, brat. But I figured I don't really care. Besides, you just went through your first real villain attack. Second.
Hound Dog tilted his head.
Second?
Katsuki was silent for a moment.
The sludge villain. It was like a year ago. It was on the news and everything. Everyone saw.
Hound Dog thought for a moment.
I think I remember something about that. 2 kids got caught up in the attack. Who was the other? Deku.
Hound Dog nodded.
One of the kids ran in to save the other. I take it you ran in to save Midoriya?
Katsuki stared silently at the floor.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Katsuki huffed.
And then I was just another weak-ass victim again at the USJ.
Are you sure? Because I heard you managed to pin the warp gate. That doesn't sound like a victim to me.
13 got hurt because of me, Katsuki yelled. If I hadn't run in at the beginning, they would have been able to suck up that stupid warp villain. And then I got warped away with shitty hair, so it would have been my fault if he got hurt too.
Shitty hair? Hound Dog tilted his head slightly.
Kirishima,
Katsuki grumbled. Oh, so he's your friend?
We're not friends, mutt.
Katsuki glared at him.
He's just some stupid extra who follows me around.
Hound Dog grinned behind his muzzle. And yet you know his name. Katsuki opened and closed his mouth a few times before slouching back into the couch.
Shut up, you stupid mutt.
Hound Dog's laugh sounded like a bark.
Fine, brat. We can talk about something else. But just for the record, I'm glad you're making friends.
Katsuki gave him a dirty look, but he just laughed again.
Okay, dropping it. But I did want to dig deeper into your guilt about 13 getting hurt. Why not blame the warp villain? He's the one who actually hurt them, right? I still got in the way. I was worse than useless. Yeah, maybe at that point you were, I can give you that. You ran in without thinking and someone got hurt. There's no point in trying to pretend that didn't happen, Hound Dog said. That being said, it's your choice where we go from here. We can try and work through some of the guilt you feel about 13's injury, or we can talk through some strategies to make sure something like this doesn't happen again.
What? Katsuki looked at Hound Dog skeptically.
You're not gonna force me to talk about my feelings?
Hound Dog shook his head.
I already told you, brat. I'm not here to force you to do anything. If you feel like strategies are going to be more useful for you right now than trying to figure out that tangled ball of emotions you feel, I'm just along for the ride.
Katsuki thought about it for a moment.
So what? How do I make sure no one gets hurt because of me?
Hound Dog shrugged.
I'll be honest. You'll never be able to completely. We're heroes. People get hurt in our line of work, but that doesn't mean we can't target what led to this disaster and fix it. So what happened? You said it yourself, Katsuki grumbled. I ran in without thinking and someone got hurt.
Running in without thinking. Hound Dog wrote something down.
That seems like something you do a lot. You're a smart kid, Brad. I've seen how you fight, but The fact is, when you act without thinking, people get hurt. What? That seemed way too general. How did we get from 13 to whatever the hell it is you're talking about? Did you ever stop to think when you were bullying Midoriya? Hound Dog asked pointedly. Katsuki thought for a moment. Had he ever thought about it? Had he ever really stopped to decide to be mean to Deku, or was it just something he did because it felt good in the moment? Fine, you stupid mutt, he said finally. Let's say that's part of the problem. How do I fix it? Hound Dog smiled. You stop to think. Katsuki scoffed. Can see why they pay you the big bucks. Hound Dog laughed. I know it sounds simple, brat, but it really isn't. It might be the hardest thing you'll ever do, and you're gonna fail a lot of times before thinking first becomes a habit. So, I guess it just comes down to if you're up for the challenge. Katsuki grinned. I'm always up for a challenge, you stupid mutt. That's what makes me the best. Chapter 32. Preparations. All for One leaned back in his chair as his computer read the article out loud again. It had been published anonymously on several major hero forums a few days ago and had gone viral almost immediately. Is discrimination hurting the gifted? The writer didn't go into much detail, but they provided some troublesome statistics that seemed to prove that students with strong quirks were actually worse off because adults treated them as better than their peers. Even though the argument was counterintuitive, it had already sparked major controversy, and even inspired a few activist groups to take up the cause. He would have to find whoever wrote the article and put an end to them. It just wouldn't do if society realized that their own hero system was responsible for most of the villains on the street, and took steps to fix it. If the weaklings were no longer oppressed, there would be fewer desperate people for him to manipulate and add to his army. He much preferred the current hero system, all things considered. Which, of course, brought him to his next problem. Deku. The boy was intriguing, and definitely had a lot of potential, but if a quirkless weakling like him was able to become a hero, it would disprove the right equals might mentality that made so many wonderful villains, and might spark annoying changes. All for One had thought the boy would jump at the chance to have a quirk because it should have been his greatest weakness and insecurity. Giving him a quirk should have put Deku's valuable mind under All for One's control and added a powerful pawn to his army. But not only had Deku apparently soundly rejected the offer, he had damaged his masterpiece. It was a smart move that might have made All for One proud if Deku had been on his side, but he'd had to temporarily transfer his self-healing quirk to Tomura just so his finger would reattach, and even then it'd been severed too long, and disintegration would always be weak and finicky on his left. If All for One hadn't spent so much effort making sure Tomura's true identity would be a devastating blow to All Might, he would have been tempted to throw the boy away and start over. But as it was, the boy would have to do, even in his weakened state. So that left what to do with Deku. If Tomura wasn't still healing, he would just ask him to kill Deku as he walked home from school. But unfortunately that was an option, even if Tomura would jump at the chance. All for One could always have someone else commit the murder, but that just didn't have the same poetic quality, and it wouldn't have the same effect on All Might as one of his students being killed by a villain he let get away. All for One smiled as the article finished. Maybe he should wait until after the sports festival. There was always the chance Deku would do terribly and take himself out of the running, in which case the problem would go away. And if he did well, it wouldn't be too much longer until Tomura healed. Either way, he wasn't going to let this minor inconvenience grow for too long. Well done, Midoriya. Nezu poured tea for them both as Izuku sat down for his usual lesson. I was skeptical about combating the issue separated from the school, but I believe it's gone over rather well, don't you think? You were skeptical? Izuku asked. Then why did you let me do it? I wanted to see how it turned out. Nezu sipped his tea. This is, after all, your project, and you seemed convinced it would work out. Things like this often seem to work better when the public has a clear enemy that they can crucify. Enemies tend to unite people, you know, but in this case it appears to be different. Why do you think that is? Izuku thought for a moment. Actually, I don't think it is that different. Go on. Well, the main reason I decided to address the issue thematically first was because I finally realized that Aldera probably wasn't the only school where this is an issue. I was afraid that if Aldera was the only enemy from the beginning, the issue would end as soon as they were shut down or forced to reform, but the deeper issues that led to their abuse would remain unaddressed. But now, people are seeing the issue, not a scapegoat, which has led them to see society as the enemy, which is more accurate anyway. Does this make sense? Nezu smiled. It seems as though your goal has changed then. You are no longer simply focused on bringing down your abusers, but on creating meaningful change. That is a lofty goal you've set for yourself. Izuku smiled sheepishly. Yeah, I guess, but it needs to be done, and if I don't do it, who will? Besides, I'm already trying to change the system by becoming the first quirkless hero, so I guess it makes sense that I'd be behind other major changes too, right? Very good. I congratulate you on the success of your first endeavor, but of course, it is going to take more than one inflammatory article to create lasting change that you're going for. I'm ready. Good. Nezu clapped his hands together. But, speaking of you being the first quirkless hero, how are your preparations for the sports festival going? Really well. Izuku smiled. The spars we have in hero class are really helpful, and I've also been working on my analysis and making sure I can not only identify weaknesses in a quirk, but I can figure out how to exploit them quickly, but... Izuku bit his lip. I was wondering if I could get some advice? Of course, Nezu smiled. That is my duty as an educator, after all. Izuku nodded quickly. I was wondering whether or not I should apply to be able to use my weapons. You see, I don't want people to see me with a weapon and think, oh, the only reason he's able to win is because he has weapons, because then I'm afraid they'll just see me as a quirkless weakling that will only be on par with the other students because of my weapons, and I really want to prove that... Nezu held up a hand to stop Izuku's rambling. I see the issue here. You, of course, want to prove that you're just as capable as the other students, even though you're quirkless, and you believe that using weapons to make up for the difference would get in the way of the message you're trying to send. Is that correct? Izuku nodded. But I'm also scared that if I don't use my weapons, I won't be able to beat some of the stronger students, especially in the individual rounds. What if I get paired against someone like Todoroki? If I lose to a student with a strong quirk because I don't use a weapon, they'll see the fact that I lost as proof that the quirkless can't be heroes. That is quite the pickle. Nezu took a sip of his tea. Well, are you worried about the first 2 rounds? Not really. I beat your obstacle course in the entrance exam no problem, so whatever the first 2 rounds end up being, I think I'm smart enough to get past them, even if I don't have any of my weapons. Have you considered applying to be allowed weapons, then only using them in the one-on-one battles? That way you could prove you're capable without them, while still giving yourself the greatest possible chance of success. That's brilliant! It's like the best of both worlds. I think I'll do that. Nezu chuckled. I'm glad I could help. Izuku pinched his bottom lip and started to mutter, as he stood and headed for the door to his next class. I think I should probably limit my weapons to just 1 gun and 1 knife, though. I don't want people to say I had an unfair advantage or was overcompensating for lack of my quirk. Maybe...
Nezu shook his head fondly as he watched his student almost run into a door before remembering he should probably open it. If nothing else, the sports festival this year would definitely be interesting. Hitoshi Shinso didn't hesitate as he joined the crowd outside 1A's classroom. This would probably be his best chance to see his competition and figure out what made them tick before the sports festival. He needed to know what would annoy each of them, what would make them talk. He smiled slightly as the door opened, and a few students reared back in shock at seeing themselves trapped in the room. Okay, so the guy in the glasses was a bit uptight. He might be able to get him to talk by being flippant. The green-haired one seemed insecure, so he could probably use that, and... Man, that blonde guy was a jerk. Maybe it was time to get involved. Get up close and personal, so he knew what buttons to push in the festival. Hitoshi shouldered his way through the crowd until he was standing right in front of the blonde guy. Is everyone in the hero course delusional? Or is it just you? The others seemed scared, so the blonde one had a temper. Nice to know. How disappointing. I wanted to be in the hero course, but like many others here, I was forced to pick a different track. Such is life, but now I have another chance because if any of us do well, they'll transfer us to the hero course. Of course, that means they'd have to transfer someone out to make room. Hitoshi smiled slightly as 1A gasped. Maybe he should say something else to put them on edge? They'd probably be more likely to respond if they were already uncomfortable around him and saw him as a threat. I'm here to warn you that if you don't do your best, I'll steal your spot right out from under you. He let himself fade into the background as a very loud 1B student started yelling. He watched the students' reactions carefully, paying special attention to who their friends were, in case getting them to talk about themselves wasn't enough. He'd made them nervous. Good. Now all he had to do was follow through on his threat. Chapter 33. Nervous. Thankfully, the stadium was large enough to give each class their own locker room. Izuku wasn't quite sure what he would have done if they'd been forced to share a space with the other classes, especially since Karski made them all want to murder their class at his behavior a few days ago. Pretty much everyone was sitting in nervous silence, and those that weren't were filling the space with small talk. This was going to be their chance to really let the world see them. It was their debut in a way. The sports festival was always like this. But it was even worse for 1A because the world was expecting great things from the class that had survived the USJ attack. And it was even worse for Izuku because he had to show that a quirkless kid was capable of being a hero. It was just so much pressure. Midoriya. Izuku looked up to see Todoroki standing in front of him, looking as passive and determined as ever. Todoroki had a strange fire in his eyes, though, that Izuku hadn't really seen before. What was this about? From an objective standpoint, Todoroki said, I'm stronger than you. Izuku hunched his shoulders slightly. Yeah. Everyone here is, really. However, you've got the backing of a lot of heroes, not to mention all the experience you've had before even coming to UA. I think you're the only one here that has their own reputation already built. I know most of us wish we had that, rather than being known for our quirks or who our parents are. So know that I will beat you. Whoa! Kaminari smiled. What's up with all these declarations of war lately? We're not here to be each other's friends. Todoroki swept the room with a glare. Izuku forced himself to stop trembling. Yeah, Todoroki was stronger than him, and he'd kind of hoped he'd be able to start the festival without any glaring reminders that he was biologically weaker than everyone else, but that didn't matter. Todoroki, I don't know what's going through your head or why you feel the need to tell me that you'll beat me, but you're not the only one here with something to prove. The other courses will be coming for us, and we're all gonna have to fight to stand out. I'll be aiming for the top 2, so if this is a declaration of war, I accept. Shota really didn't want to be here. Not that he was mad about having to attend the sports festival, even though he thought it was a case study of everything that was wrong with the hero system, but why you'd let Mike bully him into being an announcer, well, at least you'd get to see Deku showing off and wouldn't have to deal with the crowds in the stands, so it wasn't all bad. There was a knock on the door of the announcer booth, and Shota looked at Mike skeptically.
I thought no one was supposed to be up here but us.
They aren't. Mike stood to answer the door, both because Shota wasn't supposed to be moving around a lot during his recovery, and because he probably wouldn't have stood to answer the door even if he had been completely healthy.
Oh, Miss Joke, what are you doing here?
Shota! Fukakato swept past Mike and hugged Shota.
I can't believe this cockatoo talked you into announcing. Ow.
Fukakato jumped back. I'm so sorry. You know I'm just a touchy person and I forgot, but I really shouldn't have forgotten. I mean, I visited you in a hospital. Shota readjusted in his chair.
Don't worry about it, Fukakato. You're rambling almost as much as Deku.
Fukakato chuckled. Yeah, I guess the kids' habits are kind of contagious, aren't they? How are you, Shota? Mike caught Shota's eye from behind Fukakato and mouthed, Shota. Shota shot him a glare, then turned back to Fukakato.
I'm fine, Fukakato. Everything hurts and I'm stuck in here with someone even louder than you, so I don't know who I pissed off in a past life, but there's more room in here to nap than there is in the stands, so there's that.
Fukakato laughed, and Shota didn't know when he started enjoying that sound so much. By all means, it didn't really make any logical sense. Her laugh was loud, almost explosive, and Shota was quiet and introverted. So her laugh should have been annoying and make him wish life had a mute button like it used to. So, since when did he want to hear more of it?
Did you find a good seat, Miss Joke?
Mike asked. Fukakato nodded. Yeah, I'm sitting with Brave, and we've got a pretty good view of the first years. Boring old Nighteye decided to watch the third years.
Yeah, well, it's his intern's last year, so he probably wants to watch him, Shota pointed out.
So? He's already seen Tagato in 2 sports festivals, and trained him personally, so he already knows what he's capable of. Fukakato huffed. Deku, on the other hand, always seems to find a way to surprise. Brave and I are sitting with some other underground heroes, and you should hear the chatter. Shota smiled slightly, knowing she couldn't see it behind the bandages.
And what are they saying about the problem child?
Fukakato smiled brightly. Just that he's sure to win the whole thing. No, but really. Most heroes still haven't ever seen him in person, so they're super excited to see him. Fukakato frowned. But I'm kind of concerned too. There are rumors running around that he's quirkless, which of course he is, but the reception to that has been kind of mixed. Most of the underground heroes don't mind because we don't have powerful quirks either, but some of the daylight heroes are staunchly denying that there's even a possibility. They're the same ones arguing that if he is quirkless, there's no way he'll make it past the second round. They say it's an unfortunate truth. The nerve of them. Shota scowled.
I agree. What is it about a powerful quirk that automatically makes people into bigots?
Hey! Mike said loudly.
Some of us aren't that bad.
Fukikato laughed. I don't know, Mike. Maybe you're just bad in a different way.
Shota nodded solemnly. Yes, there are two categories of daylight heroes. Hopeless bigots and hopelessly annoying.
Mike stared at Shota for a while, before laughing.
Oh my god, Joke! How did you infect him with a sense of humor?
Oh, Shota's always had a sense of humor, I think. Fukikato laughed. It was just buried deep down, right next to his will to live. Shota glared at his friends as they laughed their heads off.
You come into my space?
Well, actually, it's technically Mike's space, Fukikato gasped.
What she said.
Mike smiled. Shota tried to glare harder, despite knowing they'd just ignore him.
You two are insufferable.
Aww, Fukikato pouted. But you love us anyway.
Are you sure?
Mike laughed, then glanced at the clock.
Oh crap! We need to start hyping up for the festival. You should probably get back to your seat, Joke. The kids will be coming out soon.
Oh, you're right. She opened the door. I'll be listening to your commentary. Bye-bye, Shota. Shota was already taking his seat.
Goodbye, Amy.
Shota froze. He hadn't meant to do that, it's just that she'd been calling him his first name since the hospital, and he'd just gotten caught up in the moment, and... He hesitantly glanced up at her. Her entire face was covered with a light blush, and when she saw him looking, she gave him a soft smile. Bye, Shota. He nodded, and she ran out of the room. Mike closed the door behind her, then turned to Shota with a smug look that Shota knew meant he was trying not to laugh.
Oh, shut up, Mike,
he grumbled, turning back towards the stadium.
She calls me by my first name. It's only logical I should call her by hers.
Right, Mike drawled.
I'm sure logic is definitely your only reason why. Not to mention it was only logical for her to come out of her way to visit you here, or was it only logical for you to crack dumb jokes to impress her? Logic.
Shota glared at him.
Don't you have anything better to do?
Mike laughed, but turned on the mic in front of him.
Good morning, everybody! Can I get a plus ultra?